Ruth, conflict. Employment, thank you.
We're good now. Okay.
And Councillor Ishikawa, you will send that through to the clerk. There's a piece of paper. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any other declarations of pecuniary interest today? Okay, seeing none, we do have a few invited delegations to speak on a couple of matters. One of them is water and ice, which is operating at on Lake Rosso side, and that's regarding some pop-up village that's going on. And then we also have Ms. Ledger to deal with us on a site plan agreement regarding Ballance. The first item regarding water and ice was deferred from last council, and we're back at it again this council. We will be dealing with that one separately. The Ballance action item, which was 6A4 in our planning committee meeting. We've had a request to vote and discuss that separately. So I want to get to those two in a second. We're going to go through some of our regular consent items first of all. But Councillor Ishikawa, you have another question?
Thank you. I have a concern, I'm requiring a further understanding of how the application under Ballance has come back here. And in fact, if we are today going to be revisiting the application in full, as well as I'm concerned about the correct procedure. If we are going to hear this application again, that the correct procedure was under the Planning Act has been followed. Anyhow, I'll leave that at that point.
Okay, thank you for that concern. I will sort of make a statement, I believe, and Mr. Pink, you can follow through. I believe we're following all procedures regarding the Planning Act. Our procedural bylaw within council is that we make recommendations from committee, and it is always the choice of council to support those recommendations or deny those recommendations. Within our procedural bylaw, we are allowed to pull a specific item and have further discussion on it at the council table. So it's always what I would consider a sober second thought to rediscuss anything that committee has recommended. That in particular is the item.
Just so I have a further understanding, when an application gets turned down at committee, in the past, we don't revisit the application when it comes to council. We confirm what committee had decided. So I just wanted to hear again clearly, because I may have to dismiss myself from the discussion. I would like to understand clearly whether this is going to be revisited under a full application process, and that, again, the same discussions that we had during committee, we will be engaging in those.
Okay, I am happy. I'm going to have our clerk chime in a little bit, but I'm pretty sure, just my Cole's notes, that our ability at council to go in any direction to rediscuss is there. We are either confirming or like agreeing with or denying the recommendation of committee. But the clerk I know wants to speak. So Madam Clerk.
Yes, under the procedural bylaw, under the consent agenda section, which is 7.3, anything on the consent agenda can be pulled and voted on separately. So included on those on the consent agenda is the planning committee minutes from last time where a recommendation was defeated. A council member pursuant to the procedural bylaw can request that that motion be pulled and voted on separately for further consideration. And so that is why the item was placed on the agenda, to be open and transparent, and so that everybody was aware that this item was coming forward again for further consideration.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Edwards, you have a comment or question?
Yes, a follow-up on Councillor Ishikawa. If it is polled and to be looked at separately, is it a 2/3 vote?
I'll defer to the clerk, but I do not believe it is. It is specifically any item can be pulled and discussed as a separate and not just randomly approved or within our consent agenda. Madam Clerk, is that your correct understanding?
Correct. Any member can request that item be pulled and voted on separately without a motion. The procedural bylaw specifically says that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Not to put too fine a point on this, but it seems to me this is either semantics or timing. My point is that in the past, anytime an item's been pulled, we pull it right then and there at the next meeting when we're pondering the minutes. I was surprised to see that it was very planned, very obvious that days ago it's on the agenda that Councillor Roberts wanted to pull this out. Point being is that essentially right after we voted, there could be, what I'm saying, last month, so for 30 days, we made a decision, the committee made a decision, and yet right away, when is a decision a decision? And so I understand it's our prerogative to review something. I think maybe this is in the eye of the beholder. It's a little strange that we would have this kind of notice on an item. Thank you.
So I'm going to comment on that, Madam Clerk, beforehand, and I think the advantage when we pull an item specifically in a meeting, sometimes it sends the clerk's office running in circles trying to create additional or separate resolutions. A heads up is certainly key for those district councillors around this table. We know regularly that items are pulled at district council and they are voted on separately, and the clerk's office always has a heads up. Our procedural bylaw is silent, I believe, on the timing or notification as long as it is pulled in advance. And that is what was done in this particular case. So I'm going to just try and wrap this up a little bit here. Unless there's anyone who wants to challenge our clerk on the procedural bylaw, we are following protocols in this particular case, and we will be voting on these two items separately as required. Councillor Nishikawa, did you want to request something different?
Yes, well, I think my concern is more that, in fact, additional information, because of others that are going to be speaking on this matter, that is the biggest concern for me. And I would say that I'm not going to participate. I'm really concerned that we have allowed, and in fact, sounds like it's a new way of doing business, that in fact, we're now going to give everyone, and also the applicant, and add that much more to the conversation, that in fact, those that had been part of the planning meeting and the discussions, the public I'm talking about, I don't know that they knew that they could line up and also be part of the conversation. But more importantly, I strongly feel that we have not, I did seek guidance, and I respect the clerk, but I'm not comfortable. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to the clerk. I will say to that point, we have regularly made recommendations from our planning committee, and we get plenty of emails and comments and new information from the public for or against items on a regular basis. And that is exactly the pause between our planning committee recommendation and council for the ability to understand potentially new information that has surfaced. But I'll go to the clerk quickly.
So just to clarify, a decision has not been made by council yet. It was a committee recommended denial of the application. And so in the minutes, it shows that the motion was defeated. But with respect to what I referred to previously, those minutes are on the agenda. And if a council member wants to request that a matter be pulled and voted on separately, in accordance with our bylaw, that has been done. And this is not something that is new. This has been done before. People have come and delegated with respect to items that they're not happy with on the results of previous committee meetings. So I guess I'll leave it there, but we're following the procedural bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, Councillor Kelly, is this again to challenge procedural bylaw, or I'd like to actually move on with the meeting and discuss the items?
Thank you, and through you. It's not so much a challenge. I mean, this is something that I want to make sure we're all comfortable with and we understand, because what I frankly don't understand from all of this, we had the option at the last, it was a planning committee meeting of basically deferring until, referring it right to council, subject to new information or the satisfaction of some conditions, and we rejected that. And here we are, it seems to me, in exactly the same boat as if we hadn't rejected that. So I'm just struggling I didn't have this concern until it starts getting raised. And now that we talk about it, I'm not 100% comfortable that I understand this process either, given that we are doing exactly what it is we voted against at planning committee. And I realize
So
it's a different body, but.
So it is a different body. Unfortunately, it's confused because all of us sit around the table, but it is a different body and it needs council ratification. I will state again that the idea between bylaws is first, second, and third reading, as you know, through parliamentary, to give pause, to allow new information, to understand and digest more. If people are still firm on their perspective at council, what committee recommended, then follow through accordingly. If there's additional information because of time that we've had, you've heard myself recommend and make the comment several times around this table that we always have a 30-day pause to reconsider and add more information before it comes back to council to get things moving forward. That's all that's happened in this particular case. Yes, committee made a recommendation against, but we've had committee recommendations for that have been overturned and changed against. So it goes both ways. With that, we do have two separate items that are going to be dealt with, one of them being water and ice, which is SWS on water, as well as the balance display. But in advance of that, we have a number of other items in our consent agenda, and I'm just going to go through and read those unless there's any other specific items that need to be pulled.
We need to deal with the balance first before minutes, and the minutes will be approved.
Oh, okay. So we're not going to deal with that. Sorry, I was going to do them. I need to do them in reverse order. So if I may. So we are going to go to, because they need to be pulled separately. Let's deal if we can. Let's go to the balance display perspective. And I think Ms. Ledger will let her into the meeting. She wanted to speak to this item, and she's speaking, remember now, not to committee, but she is speaking to council, who make the ultimate decision for or against an item. So we're letting Terry into the meeting. I see we're connecting to audio. There we go, Terry, we can see you. And I just need you to unmute your microphone, and you can advise accordingly on the balance display. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really just here to answer any questions. I think the main concern with the application was environmental. Eric Ballance has provided us with a summary with regards to his research on the topic for this meeting. So hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at that. But I think what I'll do is just send it over to him to speak to this, if that's okay with council.
Absolutely. We'll let Eric into the meeting if he's on standby. Thank you for that. There we go. Eric, welcome to our council meeting. Over to you. I'll just get you to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome.
Yeah. Okay, do I have the floor here?
The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me delegate today. I wanted to address, obviously, the environmental concerns that were raised last month, specifically to the supposed toxins in container flooring. Over the last month, my team and I have spent considerable time digging into some research on this topic, as there are a lot of myths and unknowns out there. We wanted to have some evidence brought forth based on actual regulations and science, and not just on Google searches. I hope that everyone received my research summary yesterday and had a chance to review it. Okay.
believe, yes, it has gone through to council. Thank you for that.
Okay. The findings that came out of it quickly, I just wanted to summarize what I put in my executive summary. There are what are called ISO standards in the manufacturing of these containers, first and foremost. These standards are accepted by international association, such as the United Nations, the WHO, and that also the federal government uses this on the importation of containers in the first place. The floorboards themselves do have an insecticide that is used on them. There's 4 common insecticides used, and this protects the floor to all the environmental factors of shipping cargo around the world, and keeps bugs out from infesting the wood. These insecticides are clearly labeled on the data plates that are on the back of every shipping container that's brought into Canada, and I referenced some of those in my deck. The 4 most common insecticides that are used, one of them is Thallium 400. This is an insecticide that is regulated by the Pest Control Board of Canada, and the active ingredient in it is used in many products within Canada. On food products, they're used in veterinary products, and they're used on things like bed bugs for mattresses. There's a very low volatility within these, and that the risk is, there's only some risk if they were ingested in large quantities. I wanted to refer to a study that we found out of the United States by the National Portable Storage Association, the NPSA. Their findings from this study investigated that these 4 common insecticides, and they did not show that there's any long-term concerns over health risks with these pesticides. They are approved for food products, veterinary products. They are evaluated by the WHO, Food and Agricultural Organizations of the UN, and the US Environmental Protection Agency. They feel that any contact with this flooring has minimal health risks, and that these floors, when used for other uses other than cargo, should be encapsulated. That the floor should be covered with a plywood or another flooring substance, that there should be a sealant of some source used, like a polyurethane. And in our case, we actually spray foam the underside of these. I do understand the concern that left as it is, that there could be health risks. And so, the notion of using a used container sitting out there with these exposed is a concern, so they should be encapsulated. The only risk that they say is during sanding or cutting, the inhalation of these insecticides that are in the floorboards. So during those processes, that personal safety equipment should be used. Ventilation masks, long sleeves, so forth. Cargo containers, as they are, is a highly regulated vessel. There's inspections on all ends of shipping, on loading and unloading, as well as in repair. According to all the international bodies regulating container movement, it's highly unlikely that contaminated containers could actually enter the marketplace. Again, I refer to, used containers, to me is a concern. So there should be some sort of regulations on managing the use of used containers. Containers go through cargo worthy designation inspections. In our own operating procedures with these containers, we purchase what are called one-way new containers. These are the best shape possible. We purchase them through a broker. They are inspected. We then clean them with an eco-solvent cleaner. And then we do plywood. We currently do plywood over the floors and spray foam underneath. Anytime we do a cut in the floor, like for plumbing, we have proper ventilation masks and all the safety equipment. We also use the same equipment in our spray foaming process. These encapsulate all potential harmful insecticides that are inside it. And in summary, we want what's best for Muskoka and our clients. We want to provide safe housing solutions. We want to become a leader in this growing build method. And we want to work with Muskoka Lakes to develop proper standards. We're hoping that this is sufficient evidence to show you that we can get our building application pushed through. Any questions?
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Ballance. Councillor Zavitz? Glenn, you are muted.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm muted. I'm not muted now. So thank you for this, Eric. And you and I have spoken after the post the meeting. At least we're here today and we're talking about insecticides. Tellurium 300 is the one I've been referred to, and Radium FHP 60 are insecticide, goes into cypermethrin, which is an insecticide. I'm going to state that AstraZeneca was a great fix until it wasn't. I would ask you here and now if you would agree to remove all of the wood floors in your containers, whether they've been across the ocean once or none. I would ask you to sandblast all the metal on the whole container, and I would ask you to repaint the complete structure. If you would do that, I would support this this today. If you would give us that commitment.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is yes. At the end of the day, what we are talking about is the concern over these floorboards. Well, it is a standard across container manufacturers across the globe to encapsulate these things as a standard to protect anyone. If that's what the council feels to have this approval, we will remove the floors. It just unfortunately does add extra costs.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you and to Eric Ballance, I think you've done a terrific job here. You've educated me, you've educated, I think, all of us. These particular type of containers are going to grow in the number and grow in use. And I think we need, as a council and as a township, to figure out how to work with them rather than pretend we can stand in front of them. I think you've given us some really good, valuable information. Quite frankly, I'm very comforted by the use of your use of the word encapsulate. If these things are encapsulated, if they are sealed from the top with some kind of vinyl flooring or polyurethane, if they're sealed from the bottom with a spray-in foam insulation, then you know, there's really very little else that we can do. I like Councillor Zavitz's idea. If we can replace the floors, that's even better. But I thank you for your effort on this one and for getting it back to us so quickly. I think it's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding, and thank you, Mr. Ballance. It was a great resource that you gave to us, and I am in support of this application. But my question may actually go to Mr. Snyder or maybe you, Mayor Harding. If we decide today to take the floors out, and if Mr. Ballance is willing to do that, I think that's a great solution. But my understanding is we already have these being used within the township. Don't we need to standardize that then with our building permits being out? It's a question that I need to ask, because I don't understand that Mr. Ballance has to do more than somebody else who's applying for this. That's my procedural concern.
Yeah, Mr. Ballance wants to chime in on that, and I see his planner, Chair Ledger's also make a comment.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, two things. So I would argue that if this is the due course that Muskoka Lakes would happen, then used containers, quite frankly, should not be allowed in the township with existing floors at all. The concern for me is that federally that the government allows these in, feeling that they're safe the way they are. But when they are sitting on someone's land, they could have had harmful chemicals in them at all. And I don't feel comfortable using them as a home product. If we're making it mandatory that the floors are removed, used containers to me are the biggest culprit. The second part of it is we are in talks with actual container manufacturers in China, and we can order what are called purpose-built containers. They will do all the modifications for it, the heavy lifting of the metal work for us for the windows and door openings, and we can actually order them without flooring. We're also investigating other flooring options that we can get from China that do not have these insecticides, because they're not intended to be used as a cargo vessel to keep the flooring costs in line with budget expectations to clients.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bridgman, you have a secondary follow-up question?
So thank you, Mr. Ballance. I guess I go back, and this may not be the right forum for it, but how do we as a council say we don't want original flooring to be used in the township of Muskoka Lakes? I guess I'm beyond this. I'm going to support it, but how do we make that happen everywhere? I guess is my question.
CBO has turned on his camera, and from a regulation perspective, and I've actually got a supplemental question that maybe Mr. Snyder can answer, but Nick?
I turned on my camera simply through your chair, Mr. Mayor, turned on my camera simply to engage in the conversation and respond to Councillor Bridgman's question. The concern raised at this point, the building code makes no specific regulation as to the use of containers as building materials. And to that regard, in combination with applicable law, there is nothing that would set out specific requirements to address the concerns raised by council.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Roberts, and then I'll go to Councillor Mazan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would like to get input from the CAO on this, because the research I've done, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We will have a build completed on waterfront within Muskoka by the end of the month. It went straight through planning, and because of just what Mr. Snyder was talking about, the applicant met with the planning department, made sure that they could construct when a module came in, it was fully built to the specifications and they wouldn't have any issues. So we need ASAP, as soon as possible, and I'm asking the CAO to chime in on this, what can we do to get a staff report back so that we can begin to have guidelines and policies as they pertain to modular container builds? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If the CAO wants to chime in on this, or maybe Mr. Pink from a planning perspective, but it actually, as I'm listening to this conversation, it seems to beg a bigger question, because I can walk 200 feet down the road, do my curbside pickup, and buy Roundup, which is a pesticide, for my plants. And the question I would ask is, how are these pesticides? How do we class one versus the other? Do we know the specific context? I know from a district perspective, we do spraying with very harmful chemicals, and there's certain policies that we have to follow from an environmental perspective with that. So I'm just, do we need a full environmental policy across the district on how certain things are used or not used, and in this particular case? So, you know, the only reason this is coming here right now is because of a site plan control in the urban center. But in our building code, it's fine if it's a structure, and we will never see such buildings going forward. So again, are we singling out or not? And I'm not sure, Mr. Hammond, if you want to try and chime in on this, or Mr. Pink, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Hammond first of all as to how we may quarterback this, then I'll go to Councilor.
Thanks, Your Worship, and certainly I would invite comment from Mr. Pink and further comment from Mr. Snyder, but I think what Councillor Roberts is referring to is the notion of some kind of guidelines that would be prepared, or fact sheet that would be prepared to assist with the guidance of how these house shipping containers are going to be used. But I think it also depends on the nature of the use and the location. You know, commercial, residential, simple accessory storage, etc. I mean, to the extent that if council is interested in directing staff to prepare guidelines, I think Mr. Pink would advise council that we may need to engage a consultant to assist in that regard, but perhaps Mr. Pink can add some more detail. Thank you.
Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. As much as staff can certainly look at the the option of producing guidelines, I think we have to go sort of more to the root of the issue. And I think we've heard Mr. Snyder, the chief building official, indicate that there's nothing in the Ontario Building Code that could control this. And I would look for him to expand on that if needed. With respect to the Planning Act, Section 34 of the Planning Act controls or dictates what council can and cannot pass in a zoning bylaw. And it's abundantly clear to me that you cannot, through a zoning bylaw, control construction materials or the type of building materials used in construction. So I really question sort of the benefit of guidelines or a fact sheet. There are other bodies and agencies that control materials and the standards they have to meet to be able to be sold to the public. And I'm certainly happy, less so. I think it'd be useful to engage a consultant to produce guidelines. I would look to perhaps some legal advice as to whether we have any ability to control, again, through any planning mechanism, the materials used. But again, my certainly review of the Planning Act, it does not appear so. I would be surprised to hear otherwise.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hold on. I'm going to Councilman Zam with the question right now.
Thank you, and through you, a couple of things. First of all, I did want to thank the Balances for taking a really good effort in the last 4 weeks to come forward with a lot more detailed information. So thank you for that. Question, I think I have two questions. So the first one is it a possibility that anytime an applicant came forward with a modular or shipping container, it's automatically dictates a site plan, no matter where it is, in which case then that we would just be going through this process every time and it becomes a set standard that way?
I'll take that as a question. Mr. Pink, David?
Thank you. That is one possible option. I'd have to explore wording the site plan control bylaw. As we know, site plan control bylaw is dictated by the zone that you're in, the lake you're on, or the size or the extent of development proposed. I'd have to explore the authority of imposing site plan depending on what materials you use. That may be tricky, but one way, as we know, we're going through an official plan review process where essentially all waterfront development will be subject to site plan control. That is one ability to have guidelines through that process to take these types of stipulations or requirements. My only caution would be similar to the zoning bylaw and an inability to control building materials. I think that's also abundantly clear in the site plan control section of the Planning Act. There's not an ability to control building materials through that process. So if the municipality were to be challenged on our authority to impose that type of restriction, I have to warn council that I think, in my opinion, our likelihood of success would be not be great.
Okay, thank you. You have a supplemental?
Yeah, thank you. If I could, and it might just be a statement at this point, but a few cycles ago, we did have our climate, the climate gentleman from the district come and present. And at that point, we did talk about, there is one group, I think it's Chris Magwood Designs, and they do have a whole white paper on different building materials. And just given the importance of building in the township of Muskoka Lakes and to our economy, I do wonder, I'm throwing this out as an idea, is it worth having somebody look at how to incorporate these things versus just saying it can't happen? Like, I know that there are some rigid guidelines, obviously through the Planning Act, that you are very well versed in, but I'm interested in understanding how do we shift thinking. So I think that's maybe more a broad statement. And I think this shipping containers is a starting point to understand how do we encourage green building to the best of our abilities in the township. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I'm reading, Mr. Ballance, I'll let you hold for a second. What I'm understanding, we have a willing applicant in this particular case to replace the floors within the shipping container to be able to move this forward. What I do believe is that we need to ask our Director of Sustainability and Environmental Services to possibly produce sort of a white paper for us to understand implications, legalities of pesticides within containers into the building industry, and can we go further? I think in this case, again, we're trying to avoid any legal challenges, and thankfully that Mr. Ballance has agreed to remove those. So I would be proposing an amendment on this particular application to add a clause that says, and that the floors contained within will be removed and replaced. Mr. Ballance, are you okay with us adding that in there, that you would replace the existing floors? I'm getting a yes.
On this application.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Council, any other comments on that? Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. I would only point out that it's possible he has cans with no pesticides in the floor, that they would need to be replaced.
I'm just going to suggest that's true, but then we get into a whole bunch of other questions. And I think to move this forward right now, we can leave it at him that there would be no pesticides, or we just make a recommendation right now for the half a dozen that he's doing in his development, that he's just going to replace the floors. Mr. Ballance, how would you like to see the wording of that? I mean, are you okay to replace going forward right now to move this forward?
Yes, I mean, if that satisfies to keep things moving. I just wanted to mention that, beyond this though, if a white paper is created or an independent consultant is brought in, that the Pest Management Regulatory Authority of Canada should be looked to. I spoke to a gentleman there. They are responsible for regulating pesticide use in any product in Canada. And these specific insecticides that we're talking about are on their list. So I would hope that they would be consulted as part of that process moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And I think I've actually been able to add Councillor Kelly's comments into maybe something we can all live with. I'll read in a second. Councillor Edwards?
Yes, I think under the short notice, I could probably support it if the floors are coming out. And that, I think we should get a consultant on this so that going forward, we don't run into this again. And I believe Councillor Kelly had also asked for him to be sprayed down and painted as well. Thank you.
Okay, so quick question. So I'm talking about a slight amendment to this floor comment, and this would be registered on site plan, so our staff would be able to follow through administratively. And the amendment would be, and that the existing floors in the containers will be removed and replaced should they contain pesticides. Okay, and our staff can administer that. With that said, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Zabit, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that site plan application SPA 5220 Balance Rule 5818 be approved, subject to the following conditions. The stormwater management and site grading details be provided to the satisfaction of the district and township, demonstrating the post-development stormwater flows match pre-development stormwater flows. The satisfactory securities be submitted for stormwater management, grading works, and landscaping works. That it be demonstrated that any exterior lighting fixtures will be dark sky compliant. That an access permit be issued by the District of Muskoka, if required. That the applicant obtain council approval to provide payment in lieu of required parking in the amount prescribed for the relief of 3 required spaces. That the garbage enclosures be satisfactorily buffered. That the agreement contained a provision that any shipping containers utilized for construction materials be confirmed that they do not exceed any legislated limits of chemicals or contaminants, and that landscaping plan be provided to the satisfaction of the township, and that the existing floor in the containers will be removed or replaced should they contain pesticides, and that this approval will expire on May 12th, 2022, unless a corresponding site plan agreement has been entered into and registered on title of lands, and that cash in lieu of parking spaces in the amount of 3 spaces be approved. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, I'd be fine with everything except the whole notion that if the floor does contain pesticides, I would like to see it simply read, remove the floor. Unless he can prove otherwise, that from China, that it was a brand new, virgin plywood floor, and then he would receive some sort of a pass on that. But otherwise, we should, otherwise he's going to tell us, sorry, not he, someone will just say, well, there are no pesticides. So I don't know, we obviously now know after weeks and weeks and weeks, we don't know whether there's pesticides or not.
So I appreciate that. And we're going to leave it to staff to confirm whether or not there were pesticides at one point in those floors. If there was, they will need to be removed. So I think that answers all of our questions. It's not up to Mr. Ballance to say yes or no. There would have to be certificates, and our staff will be administering that accordingly. Councillor Kelly, want to comment?
Just hopefully to alleviate some of Councillor Zavitz's concern. These things are heavily regulated in terms of pesticide disclosure is on a plate bolted right to the door. And if it's ever had pesticide into the floorboards, it's stamped into the plate, not only where it was applied, but the type of it, the name of it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz, one more comment. And then I call it.
Thank you. And I do understand that. And I've done a lot of research myself. You know, it seems to me that there's 50 of them between here and Bylaw. And I've looked at quite a few. And I think when we have a willing participant like Mr. Ballance, who is willing to actually remove the floors, I don't know why we wouldn't take that opportunity. Instead, we've added a caveat that if there is pesticides, then, and why would we put that on staff? If we just make it a requisite that it has to have the floors removed, that's the end of the day. I don't know. Our staff are not scientists. They have no way of knowing whether there's pesticides or not.
I think the point, Councillor Zavitz, if I may, to provide context, he may be ordering containers if they happen to come in brand new in particular and there's no pesticides. These are going to need floors. They're not going to be steel floors. So a floor will need to be installed. And if he buys them without pesticides, why would we have him rip out good floors and put in new floors when they get here? So I think that's the context behind. Anybody else want to comment this particular time? Okay, Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry for jumping in. I just wanted to, it might be helpful if you could just pause, perhaps consider the resolution a little later and allow me to come up and reread it, because I believe what you originally read included some of the matters we discussed a month ago. And you've kept those and added what we've talked about today. And I just want to make sure that what council is about to vote on is very clear for staff and the applicant as to what the requirements are, and that they can both be met. I think it, so I wouldn't mind just taking a quick read of that resolution. Also just wanted to note very quickly that just to clarify the direction on staff coming back, I think rather than a consultant, it's likely, again, a legal opinion. I note Councillor Missand's comments. I like the idea of trying to come up with alternatives and think outside the box. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, we are limited by the authorities we have. And I think this is largely a legal opinion that council needs. We obviously issue numerous building permits every year, and we've never before at council debated the materials used in them. And I would just caution council's approach, thinking we can try to control that through processes that we really can't. So I can certainly explore a legal opinion and have that presented to council at a future meeting. Again, perhaps Your Worship, just striking the I believe it was the second last bullet that we added at the planning committee meeting to control the pesticides may be the matter that needs to be removed.
So agree. I'll let you have a look at it. We'll table that. I have not called the question at this point yet. So we'll table that. And I think they do go in tandem, as I've reread it a second time, but I'll let you also look at it as well, because there could be a pesticide within the walls, potentially if they were sprayed there, at which point then they would have to be sanded and repainted. So I think it actually contains both. The new one was specific related to the floors, but I will defer on that. Okay. And the motion is what was in the minutes. So except for as amended, that we just added. So we'll let Mr. Pink chime in on that. Okay, council. Mr. Ballance, thank you very much. We will come back to a vote and at one point, but I'm going to move on to our next application. Oh, happens to be the exact same thing. And that we'll let Mr. Newlands into the meeting at this particular point. Ms. Ledger, thank you very much for joining us again, and good to see your face at council. We're going to move on to the fire and ice application, or water and ice, excuse me. Fire and ice is that, I think, display in Bracebridge. Water and ice and similar kind of concerns. I know that Mr. Newlands is here, and I believe you have a planner with you, and that is Kathy Denardis. Ms. Denardis, are you with us? We're just letting everybody in. And I'll let you speak to that application. So we may have the similar comments on this particular one, I'm assuming. And Nora Fountain also wants to speak to it, but I'll let the applicant speak to it first of all. So, Mr. Newlands, I'm assuming your planner is coming in to the meeting. Cheryl, we're letting her in. Let's see if she's in the meeting. Kathy, are you there?
She's waiting to get in.
Oh, we just let her in. She's on that revolving door. She comes in and goes out, goes in, goes out, goes in, goes out. Gazunta. Okay. There's an issue that we say says she's joining, but is unable to join for some reason.
Oh, you're not talking about
Okay, I think Kathy is now in the meeting. Okay, your camera turned on. I can't see her yet, but oh, there she is. I see her thing. But Kathy, if we can get you to turn on your camera. And there we go. Mr. Mark-Kathy, I'll let you give us the Coles notes on the water and ice application that's before council at this particular point, and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me today. And I will give you the Coles notes because I did listen into what Eric Ballance had to say, and I won't reiterate any of that information to you. As I see it, there are 3 items that are outstanding that the council would like us to address. The fourth or existing container on site, the facade to be in a more character of Muskoka, and the pesticides and the lead container. A little background with respect to the existing container. The original marina was demolished in 2016. In spring of 2018, the container was placed there by the current landowner, and it houses the electrical system for the gas pumps. In fall of 2018, SWS took over the business and leased the land. At that point in time, Jordy had no reason to believe that the proper planning and building approvals had not been obtained. GES, along with SWS, are working together with the planning and building departments to legalize those containers. So for now, you can see on the new site plan that it is noted to be removed. With respect to the facade, as you will also note, there's a new sketch been submitted. At GES and SWS has added some additional wood shutter type finishes to the 2 end units and a pergola type in the center unit, in addition to the planters all softening up and bringing natural elements to the facade. Also keep in mind the retailers will have their goods out front, further softening the steel facade. In general, I'm not going to reiterate what Mr. Ballance had said, but they are eco-friendly, cost-effective, and durable for decades of reuse. In this case, they will only be on site for the remainder of the 3 years to 2024, and then they will be removed. Their production is energy and resource effective. Repurposing these containers keeps them out of our landfill, decreasing our carbon footprint, which is big in Muskoka. Containers hold 55,000 pounds and can be stacked 9 high. So there should be no concern with their structural strength. Each container that has been modified will also have an engineer's sign off, either from the company that supplies us with the container that is already modified or by an engineer in the area. With respect to the lead paint and the pesticides, the container will be washed down with the required soap or disinfectant to get rid of the pesticides. They will be painted inside and out, and therefore any lead paint on the container will be covered or sealed with the appropriate primers and paints suitable as per Canadian law states. The plan is to paint them white or cream. If there's another color you'd like to see, let us know, we'll consider it. With respect to the pesticides in the floor, SWS has had the container company agree to remove the existing flooring and replace it with plywood as per your previous comments with Eric Ballance. I'd just like to state that the pop-ups are a growing trend, not just in Muskoka, but also worldwide. They actually are not new to Muskoka, as Whiting's was a type of pop-up and then a general store on the docks in the early to mid 1900s. In the same location, the pop-ups will now be located. The pop-ups draw iconic Canadian retailers such as Roots and Lululemon, who employ anywhere from a couple of employees to over 20 employees each. These also allow small local businesses to display and sell their goods. The pop-ups in Manette have become a cornerstone of Muskoka, not only attracting the local and summer residents, but also bringing thousands of day trippers to the area, which not only spend money at the pop-ups, but bring hundreds of thousands of dollars to other local businesses. Geordie is aiming to accomplish this in the same trend in downtown Port Carling, which hopefully will potentially bring thousands of dollars in revenue to the local businesses and entice them and allow them to financially remain open year-round. The Township of Muskoka Lakes 2020 Economic Development Strategy talks about downtown enhancement. Their goal is to increase the number of visitors and tourists, business and resident satisfaction, and to extend the business operating season. This accomplishes that. Geordie is a man of pride and integrity and wants only the best in and of Muskoka. He has chosen the Muskoka lifestyle over the Bay Street career. He is a very well-respected entrepreneur and businessman, not only in Muskoka, but has been named top 40, under 40 in the boating industry. Within a few years, Geordie has turned ski school into multi-location marina business. He is a type of entrepreneur that Muskoka Lakes should want working in their area to help expand and increase the local economy, which translates into so many other positive things for the area. Geordie wants and is willing to work with the township and the councillors to ensure that everyone is happy and that all guidelines and bylaws are met. He loves Muskoka and in no way would want to harm the nature and or environment in the place he has chosen to live and raise his family, or the health and welfare of any of the employees of the retailers of these pop-ups. So as we've addressed the outstanding concerns that council has brought up, I'm hoping that today you'll be able to pass this development and move forward as any guidelines and bylaws that you may put in place with any future white papers or considerations in other legal ways. The 2024 deadline of us removing the pop-ups will have come and gone. That's everything.
Okay, thank you for that, Kathy. Appreciate it. Mr. Nolens, did you want to chime in? Now's your chance at this point.
I don't have anything to say. She said everything.
Okay, thank you. Council, any comments on this particular, this item was deferred back to council for further discussion, further information. Councillor Kelly, and then Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly because there was some shuffling going on. I might have missed it. Is the plan now to remove and replace the floors in the cans that are going to go in there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's good.
Yes,
Thank you.
we're going to replace them.
Thank
Same
you.
concept as the balance display. Councillor Zavitz.
Good, thank you, through you. So I wouldn't mind hearing Nora Fountain's delegation. Are we going to hear that as part of this? Correct?
I just wanted to see if there's any further questions of these two right now, and then I will come back to Nora.
Thank you. I think it might feed into the discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know that you mentioned cleaning of the containers. Where will that cleaning be performed?
That will be performed by the container company prior to bringing them to Muskoka.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of these two right now? I think we're good. Nora, welcome. I see your microphone is on.
Good afternoon. I'm going to echo some of the things that have already been said. I'm Nora with the Muskoka Lakes Chamber of Commerce at 3181 Muskoka Road, 169 Ballance. And I am here to share the Chamber's support for SWS Boatworks and their plans at their Port Carling Lake Rosso location. I won't take up a lot of time. From what I've heard, the concern is environmental, which of course is paramount. The Chamber's support is regarding the actual use of the site, and we're looking at it through an economic development lens. Unlike even 10 years ago, pop-up shops are now being embraced as part of a broader retail revitalization strategy. It's aimed to create diverse retail and to help further build a shop local culture. Plus, part of destination development involves clustering of complementary products and services. There's a lot of examples of downtowns doing this to create places for people to go, activities to keep them there for extended periods of time, spending at all our stores, which directly contributes to the local economy. And of course, we also like to see our local businesses growing and expanding. And Mr. Newlands at SWS has been doing just that, even during the pandemic. Which brings me to the next point. As I thought I understood it, approvals for this initiative, I think, were pretty much in place to the point where SWS has entered into contracts with vendors. As you can appreciate, business owners, especially now, are being asked to change things on a dime throughout the pandemic, closing one day, opening the next. On behalf of all businesses, I'd ask that we be mindful of the unintentional stress added when we have a last minute ask of them, even when it's this important. And in this case, concern for the water has come up. Certainly SWS makes their living off the water and has a vested interest in protecting it. Now that concerns have been raised, I certainly have nothing but confidence that between now and opening day that SWS with Ballance, et cetera, will find a way to answer your concerns. And it sounds like you share in that confidence. Perhaps you can even find ways to help them if you can to expedite solutions that everyone can live with. I can see considerations already being taken. Using containers for stores and tiny homes, I think Kathy said it is really popular around the world. They've really been proven to be really intriguing for a younger demographic with a lot of money to spend. So SWS is onto something. And finally, I think there's an opportunity here. I think the time has come to look at where pop-ups fit as part of a larger vision for economic development planning in Muskoka Lakes. Maybe containers too when it comes to housing. So certainly I'd hope for the longer term that these pop-ups provide a chance for stores to sort of test the waters to see if a location in Muskoka Lakes is a good fit to start something more permanent. I think we'd all like to see a greater mix of retail and dining to better serve all of our residents. So thank you for letting me express the Chamber's support today, and I appreciate the consideration that Council is putting into this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Nora. Any questions right now of Nora on this particular point? Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'm getting a sense that we are going to look to revise the water and ice application to include a similar clause to remove the flowers or pesticides accordingly.
Okay. Just 1 minute, okay.
Mr. Pink is down in his office. I see Councillor Roberts wanted to make a comment.
1 minute, please. Yes, thank you, Chair. I know there was a lot of concern with character in the previous application, and the applicant did really enhance the character. Are my colleagues supportive of the character appearance that have been made to this application? That's the question I have.
I'm not seeing any opposition. Again, right now, I think we've got a concrete wall sitting there, and we're doing a temporary for the next few years till we can get to a permanent building. So I'll leave my comments that way. Mr. Pink, I know, has the original application for Ballance and is just making sure we have the right language with my proposed amendment. Maybe we need to tweak it. And I'm assuming we need to add some similar language to the resolution of water and ice. Mr. Pink, not sure if you want to chime in at this particular point. Oh, okay. You know what, Council, I'm going to suggest we just take a 3-minute, maybe 4-minute pause, and we'll just go on a quick recess, go have a coffee, and we'll come back with a couple of resolutions. So we can pause for just a few minutes. That'd be great. There we go. Council, well, welcome everybody back. We have now passed our amendments through our Director of Sustainable Development Pesticide Control. Maybe we should add that to his title. And slight wording that makes things a little bit easier and also captures a little bit more of our discussion. So I'm going to go back to the Ballance application and read it in totality first of all, and then we've made a similar amendment to the water and ice application. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. I wonder if there's any way we could actually see both on the screen.
The difficulty is there a handwritten amendment, and I hopefully, as I will explain, I'll make emphasis as to where the change was, and that you'll be able to listen to the language. So, okay. So first resolution for Ballance is moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved, site plan approval application SPA 5220 Ballance Rule 5818 be approved subject to the following conditions. Stormwater management, site grading details be provided to the satisfaction of the district and township, demonstrating that post-development stormwater flows match pre-development stormwater flows. Number two, that satisfactory securities be submitted for stormwater management, grading works, landscaping and works. Number three, that it be demonstrated that any exterior lighting fixtures will be dark sky compliant. That an access permit be issued by the District of Muskoka if required. That council applicant obtain council approval to provide payment in lieu of required parking in the amount pre-described for the relief of 3 required spaces. That garbage enclosures be satisfactorily buffered. And this is the changed paragraph. That the agreement contain a provision that any shipping containers utilized for construction materials have the floors removed and replaced and any metal sandblasted unless they can be satisfactorily demonstrated to be pesticide free. I'll read that again. The agreement contain a provision that any shipping containers utilized for construction materials have the floors removed and replaced and any metal sandblasted unless they can be satisfactorily demonstrated to be pesticide free. So that's our new clause. And that a landscaping plan be provided to the satisfaction of the township, and that this approval will expire May 12, 2022, unless a corresponding site plan agreement has been entered into and registered on titled lands, and the cash and loan parking space in the amount of 3 parking spaces be approved. Any comments or questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, Madam Clerk, we're carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, Council, for learning and moving forward. Again, it proves our system of a pause and an understanding, giving us that opportunity before something becomes, quote unquote, a law. Regarding the water and ice, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Hayes and seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the following recommendations be enacted for action. And that's the March 11th, 2021 Planning Committee Action Item 7, Site Plan Application SPA 1321, Water and Ice Rule 5549, subject to the following added condition: that this site plan agreement contain a provision that any shipping containers utilized for construction materials have the floors removed and replaced and any metal sandblasted unless they can be satisfactorily demonstrated to be pesticide free. So the same clause that makes sure we have no pesticides within the containers. Any further comments or questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? And anyone opposed? Madam Clerk, that is carried. Thank you very much. And to Mr. Ballance and Mr. Newell, who might still be listening, thank you for your patience as we all learn a new method of construction and making sure that our environment is protected going forward. So thank you for that. I'm going to move back on to the rest of our consent agenda, and I have a resolution moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Evers. Be it resolved that the Mayor and Council adopt and enact the following minutes and recommendations contained in the May 12th, 2021 consent agenda, and direct staff proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Number 1, April 14th, 2021, General Finance Committee meeting minutes and action items 1, 2, 4 to 7. Councillor Zavitz, you have a question.
Yes, I do. And again, probably to the clerk, I should have asked this earlier. So there is a discrepancy on the Curry Street parking that was in GNF last month. There's an address that's incorrect. If we pull that out, does that get changed now, or do we leave that until it's further down on our agenda, and then I mention it then? I don't want to miscue and.
So thank you for that. We are approving the minutes accordingly. We can pause and have a closer look at the bylaw when we enact the bylaw and make sure, because it's ultimately the bylaw that has to be accurate. Madam Clerk, am I correct in that? So duly noted, Councillor Zavitz, and we can make sure the bylaw is amended accordingly.
Thank you.
So we also need to approve in this the April 14th, 2021 council minutes, April 15th planning committee meeting minutes and action items 1 to 6, 8 and 10. April 16th special planning committee meeting and official plan review working committee minutes, April 26th special planning committee and official plan review working committee meeting minutes and action item 2. Any further comments or questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we are carried. Council, thank you very much. Consent agenda, we're good there. Water and ice is done. Those are all done. We've got, let's go down to some senior management team reports, if we may. Director of Public Works, award of consulting assignment, Parks and Rec Master Plan. Mr. Becking.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report is fairly straightforward. Requests for proposals were solicited. 3 submissions were received. The proposals were reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Steering Committee, and it was the unanimous direction of the committee or recommendation of the committee that it be awarded to Sierra Planning and Management in the amount of $100,000 plus applicable HST.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved, the assignment for the completion of Parks and Recreation Master Plan be awarded to the firm Sierra Planning and Management in the amount of $100,000 plus HST, and that the Director of Public Works be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the plan. Any comments? All those in favor? There we go. That is carried. Thank you very much. I think our next one is regarding district contract supply emulsified asphalt slurry. I'm just going to read the resolution, Director. Moved by Councillor Hayes.
Your Worship.
You okay that I just read it?
Yes, by all means, please.
Moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved, Township participate in the district contract to supply and application of emulsified asphalt slurry seal type 2 in the amount of $216,367.20. Taxes excluded, and the Director of Public Works be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the project. Any comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, carried. Thank you. I'm going to read the next one. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved, Township participate in the district contract for in-place full-depth reclamation of bituminous pavement and underlying granular materials, included base stabilization and high-float surface treatment, in the amount of $458,493.18, taxes excluded, and that the changes to the Old Bridge Road, the Moon River Road, and the Doherty Road project costs included in the Public Works portion of the approved 2021 capital budget as outlined in Table 3 of the report entitled Township Participation in District Municipality of Muskoka Contract 311-21A21, dated May 12th, 2021 be approved, and that the Director of Public Works be authorized to execute all necessary documents to proceed with the projects. Any comments? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Another contract. Here we go. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that contract T2126 to award to Blue Mountain Chrysler Limited for the bid price of $73,567, taxes excluded, and that the fire chief be authorized to execute the necessary documents to proceed with the purchase. Any comments for Chief Morale on this particular purchase? All those in favor? There we go. Carried. Thank you. Bought a new truck. Charitable receipts. I'm just trying to move on here. Where are we at? Director of Finance, we want to rescind a policy. Mr. Donald, do you want to make any comments on this specifically? It's a little bit different as we're rescinding a policy and not replacing.
Thank you, Your Worship. So last month at General Finance Committee, we brought forward a new staff policy or a new policy regarding tax receipts for charitable donations. This is a duplicate. This is the old policy that then needs to be rescinded, and it would be replaced with CFS 15, which is the new tax receipt policy.
Perfect. Resolution moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be resolved that policy CFS 5, charitable receipts, be rescinded. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Land Agreements Coordinator. Pardon me? Some road closing bylaws. This would also have the Curry Street parking bylaw. Road closing. I'm out of order here then. 9A2 I'm going to, correct? 9A2. Councillor Nishikawa, I think you have a conflict on one of these road closings. I believe, is that correct, Madam Clerk? There we go. So we're going to group these together. Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that the following lands be declared surplus. That a portion of original Shore Road allowance on Skeleton Lake, concession 14, lot 10 Watt, short, rolls 2, 22, 26, and 27. That a portion of original Shore Road allowance on 3 Mile Lake, concession 5, lot 18 Watt, Flume, roll 2, 3, 82. That a portion of original Shore Road allowance on Brandy Lake, concession 2, lot 30 Watt, Rimgold, roll 2, 7, 69. That a portion of original Shore Road allowance on Brandy Lake, concession 2, lot 33 Watt, Wilson, roll 2, 7, 24. That a portion of Township Road allowance, concession E, lot 16 Medora, Kondowski, Frederick, and or Feek and Feek, Weiss, roll 6, 18, 40, 41, 42, and 43. And that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of the said properties pursuant to section 8, 9, and 11 of the Municipal Act 2001. And further, that road closing bylaw 2021-48 short, bylaw 2021-49 Fume, bylaw 2021-57 Rheinbegold, bylaw 2021-66 Wilson, and bylaw 2021-67 Kondowski, Feek, Wise be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Okay, if we have any questions, we have the shorts are here to delegate. But council, any questions on those road closings? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, that is carried. To the shorts, thank you very much for joining us. And to council, I think you may have noticed a new way of doing road closings as we're trying to group them all together in one large resolution. So thank you for that. And hopefully moving things forward. Madam Clerk, where am I going now? Curry Street bylaw parking, correct? Or do you want me to go to the bylaw enforcement? Just want to see where we want to go. I can go to 9A3.
No, 9A1 includes the Curry Street bylaw.
Right. So let me turn the meeting to Councillor Zavitz, and just to make sure, if you pull up, you had a question on the Curry Street parking bylaw, and believe that there was a wrong address. Maybe we can display the bylaw on the screen so that we're all comfortable. And or Councillor Zavitz, do you have a change specifically to the bylaw?
Very simple change, but a fundamental one. The west side parking, which we're moving to, we would like it stopped at 1021. The address 101021, and currently it's indicated as 1036. that road gets narrower and just would be a problem. So I think it was an oversight inadvertently. I apologize if it was me, but it's 1021 is what the residents have asked it to be. So.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Director Becking. The bylaw itself, and maybe we can put it on the screen, has some specifics. It says Curry Street West, 520 meters north of Wise Miller Street. So I'm not sure where that relates to a 911 address or not. And maybe we can try and put that up on a screen. So stay tuned and we'll make sure that the bylaw is appropriate. It may have been a wording difference in the report and hopefully the bylaw is correct. So maybe we can scroll down a little bit. So this is the wording in the resolution, Councillor Zavitz, or bylaw, excuse me. And so the question is, what is 520 meters north of Wise Miller Street to the end? And or Councillor Zavitz, you don't want it to go to the end?
Oh, so what I would defer to Director Becking on that. I would have no idea what 520 meters is. It would be, the number is 1021 in terms of where it would be viable, functional. So again, I wonder if Director Becking could speak to that. Any further up there towards 10036, which is somehow mentioned, I believe, in the report. Anyway, perhaps you could speak to that.
Director Becking, I'm not sure if we need to put up a Google map to try and highlight where or where not this is referring to.
I don't think that's necessary, Your Worship. I think the way to proceed, as long as there is a physical description that is recognized on the ground, it would be adequate. If it's council's wish that it go to, I believe you said 1021, then I would replace the 520 meters north of Wise Miller Street to municipal address 1021 to the end, and that would suffice.
So the 520 meters north is changed to, and Councillor Zavitz, that exact address again, please.
1021 Curry Street.
Okay. Madam Clerk, have we made that change? Do we need to address that accordingly? Or can I just read it as amended? Okay, I will do that. We'll go back to the Zoom screen, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Bylaw 2021-23 to set the tax rates for 2021. Bylaw 2021-51 to amend Bylaw 2020-53 to regulate and control parking, Curry Street Bala, as amended to run west from 1021 to the end. Bylaw 2021-62 to authorize the use of internet and telephone voting for the 2022 municipal election. Bylaw 2021-63 to authorize the use of voters list management services for the 2022 municipal election. Really don't like the fact we're talking about election already. Any further comments or questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we're carried as amended. Thank you very much. Got another resolution here to appoint a number of people. Moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Bylaw 2021-43 to appoint a building inspector. Bylaw 2021-72 to appoint a chief bylaw enforcement officer. Bylaw 2021-73, to appoint a property standards officer. Bylaw 2021-74 to appoint a seasonal bylaw enforcement officer. And Bylaw 2021-75 to appoint a property standards officer. Any further comments and questions? All those in favor? Madam Clerk, that one is carried. Okay, now I've kind of been all over the place. And where are we at? Done. item number 4. TNR Bylaw Limited. Designate site plan control. I think I can do that, and I can also probably do Woodfield. These aren't zoning bylaws, so I can just read these two. Moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved, the following bylaws be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. That is Bylaw 2021-69 to designate site plan control, Part Lot 18, Concession 11 Wood T&R Bylaw Limited, Roll 8-10-20. And Bylaw 2021-70 to designate site plan control, Parts 8, 9, and 7. Watt Woodfield Enterprises Limited, Rule 2-14-116. Any comments? All those in favor? That one's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to zoning bylaws. Bauer and McConnell. Do we need any information in particular on this right now? Mr. Soya? Quick overview, we're correcting a lot line, if I remember correctly, between a boathouse and another property on an island on Lake Joe.
Thank you, Your Worship. That pretty much sums it up. It was a lot addition and a related zoning bylaw amendment to fix that encroachment issue. And there were no concerns raised at the time from township departments, and all comments received from members of the public were in support, and no minor amendments are required.
Okay, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Mazan, second by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved, Bylaw 2021-09 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 Bauer and McConnell rules 425-4 and 425-5 be read a first and second time. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No. Are you opposed, Councillor Hayes? Or just a little delayed? I think that carries no matter what. Thank you very much. No minor amendments. I heard, Mr. Soya. Thank you very much for that. So third and final reading moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2021-9 Bauer McConnell be read a third time and finally passed. Any final comments or questions from council? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There we go. That is carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Sawyer, we're going to Dewar and Lippingwell. Oh, impact. We had no impacts. Everybody was in favor. Neighbors were in favor, I believe. Anybody have any different opinions on that? Because I think there really was no impact. People were supportive of that last application. Okay. Next application is a BA 421, Dewar and Lippingwell. Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Planning Committee heard concurrent consent and zoning amendment applications that were submitted to create one additional lot intended for commercial use, or more specifically for a dryland marina storage building, which complies with the existing zoning of that property. The retained lot is to be rezoned from its present rural commercial zone to the waterfront residential backlot zone, and to permit a woodworking workshop home-based business in an accessory building. And Planning Committee recommended to Council that the applications be approved. There have not been any written submissions from members of the public, and no concerns were raised by the Township's building and Public Works departments. Requirements by the District of Muskoka for an entrance permit and an agreement related to the location of wells have been included as conditions of consent, and no minor amendments are required.
Okay. I'll read first and second, moved by Councillor Everett, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved, Bylaw 2021-30 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 Dewar, Lippingwell, Rule 624-36-4 be read a first and second time. All those in favor? That is carried. I heard no minor amendments, so we can remove that. Thank you. Final third reading moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2021-30 Dewar and Lippingwell be read a third time and finally passed. Any further comments? All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we are carried. Thank you very much. Okay, our third application today is Lang and Merski, and I know we have a delegate. I believe Mr. Newall, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll let you introduce it potentially. I'm not sure who's going to do this. Mr. Sharp, maybe give us a quick overview of the Lang Merski application, and then we'll listen to, I think, Mr. Newall.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you'll indulge me for a little longer here than usual, there's a fair bit to unpack, and I wasn't able to prepare a written report on this, so I'll get through this as quickly as I can. Council will recall that the subject applications were heard by Planning Committee last month. Planning Committee recommended that the applications be approved subject to recommended conditions of consent, a restriction of parking spaces to no more than 10 spaces, and a restriction on docking to that which exists at this time. Numerous submissions have been received, which are attached to Council's agenda. The applicants have now reconfigured the proposed parking area. A compliant 3-foot street setback is now proposed from the lot line abutting Judhaven Road, eliminating the need for relief from the minimum street setback requirement. The setback of the proposed parking area from the high water mark has been increased from 52.8 feet to 62.7 feet. The setback of the proposed parking area from the common lot line shared with the Convies, who are immediate neighbors, has increased from 15.1 feet to 17.7 feet. The applicants have agreed to apply gravel surfacing to the parking area and to utilize dark sky compliant bollard lighting. Both matters can be addressed as part of the site plan approval process. The applicants have also agreed to enter into a consent agreement to restrict future lot creation on the proposed retained lot and severed lot number 2, and have requested that a condition requiring cash in lieu of parkland be waived, recognizing an intent to donate severed lot number 1 to the Muskoka Conservancy. Both matters have been addressed through amended conditions of consent before you today. Staff have also amended the condition of consent requiring a consent agreement in order to strengthen the access relationship between the proposed lots and the waterfront landing or other sufficient means of access over the long term. If Council is considering approval of Bylaw 2021-35 as proposed and recommended by the Planning Committee, the following minor amendments will be required. A minor amendment to restrict the number of parking spaces to 10 and to the docking to that which currently exists today. A minor amendment to permit a minimum setback of 3 feet from the northerly side lot line for the proposed parking area, and a minor amendment to permit a minimum setback of 62 feet from the high water mark, again, for the proposed parking area. And these amendments have been included in the resolution before you today. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And it was fairly concise. I appreciate that, Mr. Sharp. We have 2 delegates here. I think the first that I will go to will be Mr. Fahner. And welcome. Are you in your home office or London? Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Mr. Newall, whether he was on listed first, whether you want to hear from him first, but it's entirely up to you, Your Worship.
I think on the application side, we'll let yourself speak to our comment and then listen to Mr. Newall afterwards, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. There was a planning memo that was attached to your agenda, along with a couple of site plans that were revised. Thank you to staff for including those. We did meet out on site. It was April 27th with Nick Nicolau and Mr. Newall. We had an excellent discussion then about some changes to the site plan, which I believe you can see. We've actually come closer to compliance with the front yard setback, and we've moved away marginally from the neighbor to the southeast. I have spoken to the neighbor to the southeast, and you know, he doesn't want to see change, of course, but you know, I think he's certainly going along with it, and I don't believe that he's objecting. I did indicate to him he was concerned about vehicles coming in to the parking area. There are 4 parking spots that would be facing directly to the side of his dwelling. I did say that we could erect a half fence or a 4-foot high fence to block the headlights. And he said he would certainly be, I think he'd be happy with that. I haven't heard back from him on that. I've spoken to Mr. Lang, and there is a possibility that we can accomplish that as well. But that is a site plan matter. That's not necessarily something that is zoning. So, and I believe, you know, and certainly the site plan would have to be attached to the zoning bylaw schedule, as we are looking at some small exemptions for setbacks in terms of the parking area. We have incorporated the 3 feet back that was required from Public Works. That has been incorporated in the revised plan. Just the 2 further things I'd noted in my memo. We are amenable to having a consent agreement or in the consent agreement, no further lot creation for the southerly 2 lots. And as I mentioned in my memo, and I was actually involved in a hearing many years ago on Tobin's Island, where I was acting for the municipality against undersized lots and actually lost the case. So I think it's important that that is in there, and my clients agree that in the consent agreement, which is a condition already, we can add in there wording to the effect of no further lot creation of the southerly 2 lots. The northerly lot, we don't need to include that because that's going to the Conservancy. The last thing I'm just going to mention is the cash in lieu of Parkland. My clients have asked if that can be waived in this case, because the dedication to the Conservancy, just the value of that north lot by today's market, which of course has gone up considerably, but today's market is probably worth about $3 to $4 million. That will be donated to Muskoka Conservancy. So they feel, my clients feel, they're sort of double hit if they have to pay the cash in lieu of Parkland as well. So they're hoping that could be waived. And that's really it. I'm here to answer any questions, and depending on if Mr. Newall has any concerns, I'm certainly here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure Mr. Sharp is adding the amendment to the agreement as well to talk about no further lot creation. But I'll go to Mr. Newall for his comments, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Ian Newall, 1043 Sagamo Boulevard, Royal Muskoka Island in Manette. So I speak at the request of Nick Nicolau, who's president of the Royal Muskoka Island Association. And as you, I think, all know, our 90 waterfront property owners are directly affected by this application, as many of our properties face nearby Highlands Island. And the proposed landing for Highlands, it happens to be Royal Muskoka Lot 1, which is adjacent to the road as we all approach our properties. So accordingly, since September last year, our association has engaged in discussions with Mr. Lang and Merski, and we've been very encouraged by their willingness to implement several provisions, which we believe will reduce the risk of potential negative impacts on our Lot 1 while supporting their goal of minimum density development on Highlands. So those provisions were all discussed at the Planning Committee hearing held on 15 April. They have all been agreed to by the proponents, as Mr. Fahner has pointed out. And we simply ask that they now all be adopted and included in the items that are before council for approval today. So those include provisions in the implementing bylaw for the rezoning, that the dock size be limited to the 5 existing slips, and that the parking capacity be limited to 10 spaces. As part of the site plan control, we would ask council to direct staff to include the provisions that Mr. Fahner has outlined, including the recently submitted parking area reconfiguration, as that saves on trees, reduces the surface area affected, and that the parking area be surfaced in gravel, and that the lighting, any lighting installed would be low level, dark sky compliant, bollard mounted lighting, and that it be switch activated such the lights will not be left on all night long. In addition to those 2 aspects, we would ask council to direct staff to prepare a bylaw that would implement assigned no parking zones along both sides of the nearby roadway. And lastly, regarding Lot 1, regarding garbage collection, we understand that the district has confirmed that it will provide individual municipal collection service to each of the Highlands Island households. If this has not yet been confirmed, then we would ask council to direct staff to ensure that this is put in place. And as regards the consent on Highlands Island lots, we're strongly in favor of the provision that Mr. Fahner pointed out, which is to limit further lot creation via restrictive covenants and consent agreement. And just to further to that point, we understand that we're only talking about the east end of Highlands Island at this stage in the process, but we understand from the proponents that they anticipate proceeding similarly for the west end. So we would hope that council and the proponents will be amenable at that time to implementing a similar set of provisions. So, and with all of those, we are very, very pleased and relieved with the outcome for Highlands Island. And we think that if all these provisions are adopted by council today, then that will really increase the chances of this wonderful project succeeding over the long term, and while addressing concerns of our members that Lot 1 on Royal Muskoka Island retain its natural beauty in the process. So thank you for your service, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. I just two comments. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Lang, Mr. Merski, Mr. Fahner. Working with Royal Muskoka Island Association, it's been really nice for me to see this develop over the last little while. And I see that everything has been addressed except the no parking signs. So I just want to make sure that as a councillor, I ask that staff be directed to put the bylaw in place so those no parking signs can be on either side of the road there. It's a narrow road, there's a hill on it. It's a real safety danger otherwise. So I guess that's my request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think staff duly note that. Councillor Edwards, or sorry, Councillor Nishikawa, then Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. But I do recognize, Alan, that you had your hand up first. Sorry. Anyhow, thank you. I want to address the request for not charging for, I think I would like a report from either Director Donaldson or perhaps the CAO. There is a tax implication when lands are donated through the Conservancy. And in fact, it's a benefit for those donors in many cases. And I'm just a little bit challenged of where that piece is one piece. So for instance, we may not be receiving any additional tax dollars in the future. So there's that piece, but then also not charging for parkland dedication. I think that they, I don't want there to be a perceived double dipping into the taxability or the requirements that are others would have. And I just wanted a fuller picture on that. And I don't believe that we would have that today.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Nishikawa. I would support the motion that we wouldn't charge parkland dedication on the lot that was created and given to the Conservancy, but we would charge parkland dedication on the additional lot. I believe parkland dedications charge on every newly created lot. So,
but I would like, because it was asked for, I would like those that are smarter than me that can actually give that information.
And Mr. Sharp can probably comment on that. I'll let him or Director Pink sort of think about that for a brief moment. I'll go to Councillor Edwards and then circle back.
Yes, this is a question to you to Mr. Fahner. You were saying about future severances on those two lots because they're undersized. What is the way we can guarantee it? Because I know of one instance where it was a bylaw that it had to be the same frontage, and it went to LPAT and we lost. And that's so I just want to make sure that it's guaranteed 100% that they can never be severed.
Okay, Mr. Fahner, I'm going to actually get you to hold that, and I might go to Mr. Sharp if you have some specific language that would help us going forward on that. And I'm not sure if you want to chime in on where we would typically charge parkland dedication fees on newly created lots.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you could just maybe repeat the question. I'm not sure that it was overly clear what was being asked of us. I know the question is about parkland dedication, and I'm happy to assist.
So there's, I think, two questions here, and maybe Mr. Donaldson needs to chime in specifically. But I'll go to the first question that talks about newly created lots, that we want to freeze the lots on the island so that there cannot be additional new lots. And if you have appropriate language that we would be including so that no new lots could be created or further subdivision of those two new lots. I hope that you can work your way around that language. Councillor Edwards was concerned that they may still come back and try and do something, or that a future owner may try and get a severance that we would lose with LPAT. So if you have specific language for us to be able to secure that, it would be appreciated. I think council would be very much supportive of that. The second question was specifically relating to parkland dedication. and I'm not sure if you want to handle it or not. I believe we charge 5% for every newly created lot. In this particular case, one of the lots, depending on how you look at it, is being donated to the Conservancy. And there may be some benefit tax things that maybe Mr. Donaldson wants to answer, but maybe just overall that. But I'll go to Mr. Sharp first of all. I see Mr. Donaldson trying to think to talk about how we can protect the future subdivision.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in regard to the question about parkland dedication, we do have a policy in that regard that speaks to when it is taken, and it is 5% of the assessed value of the newly created vacant lots, or 5% of the entire lands, whichever is less. In this particular instance, I believe the applicants are requesting for parkland dedication to be waived entirely. So that is an option and for council. Alternatively, council could decide to impose that 5% requirement only on the singular lot that is intended to be developed for residential purposes, and that would be severed lot number 2. So that is a second option. And in regard to the prohibition on lot creation being included in an agreement, certainly we can come up with wording to that effect. It's typically not how we would address such a matter. This is a bit of a unique situation in that the zoning bylaw amendment that is proposed is related to the mainland property. Typically, staff would prefer for such a prohibition or restriction to be imposed through a site plan or a site-specific bylaw. But since there's no site-specific bylaw in play, if committee was uncomfortable proceeding by way of the agreement, we would need to include a condition of consent requiring a zoning bylaw amendment to impose that type of restriction. I can see the benefit of including the wording in the agreement, just given that the owner and any future owners would be aware there is that requirement moving forward when they purchase the property. As you know, we have dealt with situations in the past where an owner is wishing to subdivide their lands after such a restriction is put in place. Any owner of land can apply apply for a zoning bylaw amendment, and the details would need to be reviewed at that time. So to answer your question, Councillor Edwards, I'm not sure that there could be any guarantee, but certainly it's something that would be reviewed by staff at the time that the applications were received. So hopefully that helps. I can certainly elaborate if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Edwards' hand is up. Alan? Oh, you just muted yourself.
Thank you. I think in Peel at one time to stop and that further severances, they took 1 square foot of land off of the severance, and you could take it in the middle of the lot, so it couldn't be severed. But we should be looking at that. It should be on title as well, and that because, like I say, a new owner can then come in and ask. And Mr. Fahner himself said undersized lots have been gone to, at that time, probably OMB or LPAT, and are overturned. So I would like to make sure it's guaranteed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What I did hear, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Sharp comment on, I see Mr. Fahner is leaning in maybe to comment that we could, because the zoning bylaw amendment is on the mainland lot in this particular and not regarding the island property, but that we could put through an additional zoning bylaw amendment to fix those lots on the island. Is that what I heard, Mr. Sharp, or not? Or Mr. Fahner, maybe you can comment if your client would be amenable to that. I know it's more paperwork and probably some more fees along the way, but I'm not sure who wants to answer that.
If I could answer that, Your Worship, a couple of things. I'll be right up front in terms of Mr. Edwards or Councillor Edwards' question. There is no guarantee that somebody isn't going to come in with a future application. It's sort of like saying, you know, I guarantee that my septic system will be working 10 years from now. I can't guarantee that. You certainly hope it will. You know, but that people can make applications. There was, going back in a little bit of history, a successful situation on Ricketts Lake where future severances were prevented over the long term. So it really depends on the circumstances. You know, I think I don't know the circumstances of what happened in that particular case in front of LPAT where somebody did make application, but I think the message I would like to convey is that you do the best you can with the tools that you have. And if you want to restrict future lot creation, one way is through a consent agreement, which is already in play as a condition. My clients would not be amenable to a zoning bylaw amendment limiting those. And the reason being, this is one situation I must admit I haven't run into before, but it's going to be run into more and more. And that is the value of these lots. Because the value of the lots are high, any restriction put on future severance, and in this case, the north lot, that's going to reduce the potential value. That then reduces the tax certificate that my client can get. He has indicated to me, and of course, they're very frank and upfront people. They've indicated that if, for example, the value of that northerly lot is reduced or diminished significantly by a zoning bylaw amendment, they're going to have to put another lot on the west side of the island to make up for it. They're trying to do this as a revenue neutral situation. They purchased the island, I believe it was $10 or $12 million. They're trying to recoup that through the sale of these, but have basically more than half the island dedicated to the Muskoka Conservancy. So this is really sort of the first time I've run into it, but I can see it happening more and more. There's also large, huge GST implications as well. And they have to deal with those potential costs as well with the creation of these lots. So they have huge expenses, and they're trying to do what they can to minimize those. I did speak with Steve Ross, who is actually on Royal Muskoka Island. He's a lawyer. We had a chat. He's also actually a client of mine on Tobin's Island. And he has said that he has crafted wording in consent agreements to basically limit or prohibit future lot creation. Now, I don't know how it's been enforced, but he has said that is a way to do it. So we agree to that. But again, a zoning bylaw is going to inhibit that north lot, and I know that my clients will have a big issue with that. Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like consent agreement is a path forward in this particular case. I appreciate that. Mr. Donaldson, did you want to talk about the tax benefits of donation to Conservancy? I know then Councillor Nishikawa's question, then I'll move on.
Yeah, and thank you, Your Worship. And I did just want to acknowledge the issue. I think that it is something that requires a little bit more research on the part of staff. It is a particularly not frequent topic that I would be involved with, but I did want to acknowledge that and can report back to Council on what we can do in terms of that for going forward for such applications.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure we answered the specific question of Councillor Nishikawa or enough to be able to move on today, but to Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I suppose that is my concern, that if the request was something that at this point time we can remove from the discussion, and are we able to still move this forward? Could it be considered at the next general finance, for instance? I believe that it's a much bigger discussion, and I wouldn't want to hold up the application at this point because they've gone through all of the regular procedures, and I'm happy that some agreements have been made concerning all the parking and those sort of things. But the financial end, I believe, can't be addressed today and voted on, and that's what my concern is.
So thank you for that. I guess I'll look to Mr. Sharp or Mr. Donaldson. I think we could actually address some of the concern of the cash in lieu of Parkland or the dedication fee today. Mr. Pink's turned on his camera. And I guess what I might suggest, certainly not in favor of waiving all Parkland dedication fees. The idea behind Parkland dedication is as we create new lots and new usage, we need to make sure that we have appropriate funds going forward. The Conservancy lot that is being created, I could be swayed saying that particular one, I could waive a cash in lieu, or not cash in lieu, excuse me, a Parkland dedication fee on that particular lot, but not on the additional summer lot. Mr. Pink, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. sorry for this oversight, but I believe unfortunately I thought this matter of the delegations were going to occur at the beginning of the meeting. Actually, the consent now has already been approved when you approve the action items from Planning Committee, because that was the recommendation on the severances. So the debate on cash in lieu Parkland was made earlier this meeting. What you have before you now, I believe, is the bylaw only, which is with respect to the waterfront landing. So I would look to the clerks. I don't know if there's an ability to revisit that on the same agenda. However, the other alternative, we could bring the matter back to Planning Committee or Council next month. The beauty with severance applications is Council has the authority to amend conditions. So we can amend the condition at a later meeting, but I believe the decision has already been made.
Thank you for that. And I think we have made a decision on that. So right now, the potential for removal of Parkland dedication, I think, is done. But I don't mind coming back, I think, in the future with additional amendments, I think would be appropriate. I'm going to do first and second reading, and then I know we have some minor amendments at this particular point, but moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be resolved that bylaw 2021-35 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 Lang and Merski Rule 426-86 and 417-1 be read a first and second time. Any further comments? All those in favor? First and second is carried. Mr. Sharp, I'll get you back on and we will talk about some minor amendments and any of the other discussion today that we can include as minor amendments. Bryce?
Thank you. So as I had indicated, I believe the resolution that is in front of you is already, we've front loaded the resolution with the minor amendments that are required. So I believe you could just go ahead and read that. I'm happy to go through them again if it would be beneficial, but I'll look for your direction.
Okay, no, I think we're okay there. The only other question being some of the additional, I appreciate we have passed some of the additional information, but to Director Pink's perspective of coming back or looking at Parkland dedication in the future or lot severance or any of those kind of things, would we be dealing with those in a minor amendments fashion right now? Would we want to put some wording in there, or will we just bring it back at a separate time? Sure.
Thank you. Through your worship, I would look to Mr. Pink to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, again, we had front loaded the resolution that was previously passed with the requirement to prohibit future lot creation by way of a consent agreement. So that is already taken care of. The cash in lieu of Parkland, if needed, we could bring that back perhaps at the next meeting and amend the condition as required. If I'm hearing from you, your worship, we're looking at not waiving Parkland, cash in lieu of Parkland entirely, but rather requiring it for the one newly created residential vacant severed lot. Is that correct?
I think maybe it's appropriate to have a future discussion. I think we could amend it going forward. Maybe we bring this back to Planning Committee next month just to have a discussion about cash in lieu in light of this particular application.
Okay.
Council, if we're okay with that, we will readdress the issue and maybe rewind from a discussion about parking and no parking. Not sure we need a specific council resolution or just a direct direction to staff at this point to bring back potentially a no parking bylaw at the start of the island.
That is agree. I think for the benefit of moving this along for the applicants, that's what can be done. And I've made a note that can happen. And I'll be in touch with Mr. Becking in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a resolution then for a minor amendment moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved, Township Council amend bylaw 2021-35 Lang and Merski, and this amendment is minor in nature and does not require further public circulation. Hereby approved prior to third reading. Minor amendment shall consist of restriction on the number of vehicle parking spaces to 10 and restriction to limit docking to that which exists at this time and shown in the location extent of the revised site plan. A minimum setback of 3 feet from the northerly lot line for the proposed parking area. A minimum setback of 62 feet from the high water mark for the proposed parking area. Any further comments on the minor amendment? All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we're carried. Thank you. Third and final, Mr. Sharp, any final comments at this point, or can I go right ahead?
No further comments. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-35 Lang and Merski be read a third time and finally passed. Council, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Impacts, I think certainly the neighbors, the Royal Muskoka Island Association, working with council and working with the applicant, certainly provided some increased protection for the community. I think that's probably the best way to summarize all that. So Mr. Newall, thank you. And we will continue to move forward. Council, I'm going to suggest we take a quick 10-minute break at this point, and then we'll continue moving on. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll get our council to turn their cameras back on, please, and we'll try and get going.
GES, is that Green Engineering? I don't know why, no idea, still here. Gary Leeman's not on the list of the delegate? No, he didn't even say anything last time. Mersky was not a delegate, so it's not.
Okay, council, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have council all here. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Sharp, maybe, to go through the Leeman application. And then we also have a couple of delegates. Bryce?
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, a fair bit to unpack here, and I promise to be as quick as I can. So council may recall that the subject application was heard by Planning Committee in March. Planning Committee recommended that the applications be approved subject to certain requirements, including a reduction of boathouse size. A number of submissions were received, which are attached to council's agenda. Scott Porter, who is an immediate neighbor to the northwest, provided a follow-up submission this morning stating concerns about a future ability to construct an accessory building on the back lot, specifically within the wetland feature comprising a portion of this lot. The applicant has now revised the proposal as follows. The proposed lot coverage within 200 feet with the 2 lots deemed as 1 lot for planning purposes as proposed is 9.8%, reduced from 10.9%. The width of the proposed boathouse has been reduced from 22 feet to 20 feet. The length of the proposed dock has been reduced from 52 feet to 42 feet. And the length of the proposed boathouse has been reduced from 46 feet to 40 feet. If council is considering approval of the application, Bylaw 2021-114 could be amended to limit a dock and boathouse specifically to those that are proposed, hence locking in the proposed or intended development envelopes. The applicant's agent has confirmed that the existing septic system will not be required to be upgraded in order to service the proposed redevelopment. Based on the comments by the township's Public Works Department, a license agreement is required as the system currently occupies part of the original road allowance associated with Whiteside Road. Staff would recommend that a holding symbol be applied to the subject lands, which will be lifted following the approval of a license agreement or the removal of the system from the road allowance. Following the lifting of the holding provision, the proposed development could proceed. If council is considering approval of Bylaw 2020-114, as proposed and as recommended by Planning Committee, the following minor amendments will be required. A minor amendment to rezone part of the resultant lot to environmental protection EP1 in order to reflect a wetland feature. A minor amendment to remove the requested exemption from the maximum lot coverage requirement of 200 feet from the high water mark, and a minor amendment to apply a holding symbol to the subject lands and the provisions required to lift the hold provision be added to the bylaw that require the approval of a license agreement for the encroaching septic system, or that it be removed from the road allowance associated with Whiteside Road. And these amendments have already been incorporated into council's resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Fahner, I see you here. I'm assuming you representing the applicant in this case, or? Okay, so I'll let you speak on this particular case first of all, and then I think the neighbors want to speak as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. And actually, I think Bryce went over quite a number of things. My client has reduced the size of the boathouse. He's reduced it by 244 square feet. I'm not sure where it came from, but it seemed the magic number at the planning committee meeting was 190 square feet. But anyways, we've done a little bit better than that. So, and so we no longer require the lot coverage exemption to allow for that. In terms of the boathouse itself, we're trying to blend, I suppose, a boathouse where my client can secure his boats and kayaks and so forth within a boathouse, and yet have something that's sort of an area appearance that's a little bit like a boat port, and by using large windows, etc. So try to incorporate that into the design. And those revised boathouse drawings were, I think, attached to the agenda, and as well they were sent to the neighbors about 10 days in advance of this meeting. In terms of the towel bed, we have no objection to the holding zone, and I think that's appropriate in this particular case. The lowland area has been revised on the John Hiley site plan. There may be concern there is a small portion of land that's between the 200 feet and that low area where there could be a building put on, but it's not in the low area. Right now, my client has the ability to build anywhere in that low area right now. It's zone WR1. He could also fill that entire area too, which he has no intent on doing, and really would not be appropriate either. So anyways, he would possibly in the future want to construct a garage there, and there is room for a small garage. So anyways, in conclusion, I think that there's a lot of moving parts to this particular plan, but I think with the revisions in particular to the boathouse, I think that brings it more in compliance with the bylaw. I think my client's done what was asked of him. By combining two parcels into one, that takes away the back area that is currently a building lot. It is an existing lot of record under the WR1 zoning, so it could have a separate dwelling and sleeping cabin on that particular property. That, in fact, will be taken away by this application. But my client would like the ability of possibly have an accessory building in that location, and the way the bylaw is set up, he could do that, and it does not impact lot coverage. It does not impact the lowland area. So those are my submissions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions after the other two speak if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Greatly appreciated. And I do know we have a couple of delegates who are here to speak. I'll go to Mr. Hay first of all, and then Mr. Porter. Hopefully you can limit your comment to a few minutes. Mr. Hay, welcome. Get you to unmute your microphone. Oh, might be frozen.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Harding and Township Council for allowing me to appear today. My name is Bruce Hay, 1067 Whiteside Road, T0B1J0. Along with my two brothers, Brian and Ian, and our respective families, own the property adjacent to the southwest of Mr. Leeman's property. March 11th, I spoke with the Planning Committee on behalf of my family and my neighbors, Mrs. Irene Lane and Mr. Christoph Hippfeld, in opposition to Mr. Leeman's amendments and proposals, specifically the combining of the front and back lot, exceeding the allowable building footprint of 10%, and the size of the boathouse. The Planning Committee recommended Mr. Leeman and Mr. Fahner meet with the neighbors to come up with a compromise, if possible, on the size and design of the boathouse. On May 2nd, 4th, 2021, we received via email from Mr. Fahner design renditions and plan layout of the proposed boathouse for our review. After careful consideration and discussion with all neighboring parties, we agree that the boathouse has been reduced in size to a maximum of 34 feet by 20 feet. Now, for some reason, that 34 feet doesn't correspond with the 40 feet that Mr. Fahner mentioned, so we're going to have to explore that a little bit. But we are very acceptable of the design, and we'd like to thank Mr. Leeman and Mr. Fahner for the quality of their cottage boathouse design and their compromise on its size. We would also like to thank members of council for putting the two sides of this issue together to come up with a solution. Attached to the council agenda package is a report from Stephen Fahner of North Vision Planning. In this report, Mr. Fahner refers to the area as the location of the low area. We're unsure why this appears as part of the analysis, but we're glad it did. Our understanding of Planning Committee's recommendation to council was that the existing wetland would be rezoned from WR1 to EP1. Right now, we're unclear as to what this means and what it permits. Given Mr. Fahner's response, considering it is in conflict with, we believe it's in conflict with the Planning Committee's direction of March 11th. But Mr. Porter will speak further on that matter, as I didn't want to overstay my my welcome. But thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Hay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to hold questions right now, and I'll go to Mr. Porter, and then we can circle back and hopefully answer your questions on what the EP1 zone does or does not do for yourself as neighbors. Mr. Porter, let's see if are you in the meeting? I don't see you yet, but if you do, we'll get you to turn on your camera and your microphone. Scott Key, I see there. Mr. Porter, do you want to, oh, connecting to audio. Not sure. It looks like we might have connected. Mr. Porter, welcome to our meeting. You might be listening in on YouTube and have the delay. Scott, if you're there, the floor is yours. It appears to be connected on my end. Scott Porter. I don't see audio or video connected. Mr. Hay, in the absence right now of Mr. Porter, it seems that you've been working together. I just want to make sure that the comments you seem to refer to what he was going to be saying. We still don't have any audio connecting for him at this time. Or Mr. Porter, can you hear us? No, we're not doing it. So maybe Mr. Hay, if you want to take a few more minutes at this time, we can't seem to get Mr. Porter to comment. If you know some of his comments, we're happy to hear them at this time.
I have them here, Your Worship, and I'd be happy to read them.
Thank you very much.
This is a note yesterday from Stephen Fahner requesting feedback to the proposed amendments to Gary's boathouse. In response, I confirmed that Stephen and Gary and his architect have collaborated on an excellent compromise for the new boathouse. However, we have serious concerns related to the back lot, the low area, and Stephen's response below. It is contrary to the recommendations contained on page 48 of 297 in the Planning Committee Agenda Report of March 11, 2021. These are Mr. Fahner's comments. The backlot parcel currently qualifies as a building lot and could be developed with a dwelling and accessory buildings and structures with applicable zoning provisions. Deeming the two lots as one for planning purposes will end the ability to develop the backlot parcel as a separate lot. This can be viewed as beneficial. However, if the application is approved, it's noted that an accessory building such as a two-story garage with an upper level sleeping cabin could be constructed beyond the area of the resultant lot, lying within 200 feet of the high water mark. If committee is recommending to council that the application be approved, staff have recommended the area of the resultant lot comprising a wetland feature be rezoned from waterfront residential to environmental protection EP1 as a minor amendment, thus ensuring that the wetland will be precluded from any further residential development. If you read Stephen's response, this is now Mr. Porter speaking. If you read Stephen's response, he says Gary can build anywhere in the low area, provided he is 15 feet from the side lot lines. This is totally contrary to committee's recommendation. Also, the fact that the wetland has suddenly been drained significantly after 25 to 30 years is very suspicious. I do not know the motives or who is responsible. I was able to canoe in this area last year by gaining access from our back lot. Typically at this time of the year, the water level is at the stakes down in Stephen's photographs. However, this year the wetland has receded significantly. It was also the recommendation of committee, if the application is approved, staff have recommended that the site plan agreement to be entered into, which will be registered on title, also prohibits the waterfront and backlot parcels from being sold, transferred separately. It is important that this recommendation be instituted to prevent development of within the wetland. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So I'm at your disposal again.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hay. I appreciate it. And thankfully, the neighbors have been able to work together so that we could at least hear their comments. Mr. Sharp, I'm going to go to you maybe just to provide some clarity so that Mr. Fahner doesn't have to do it on the rezoning of the backland as a building lot currently, where the 200-foot mark lies. I'm assuming if a garage was to be built, it's somewhere between the 200 feet and what might be wetland, so on and so forth. So I'll let you provide some context. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so as staff have recommended, part of the backlot, we've recommended that part of the backlot be rezoned to environmental protection EP1 if council approves that minor amendment. Part of those lands will be zoned to EP1, and residential development would be prohibited from occurring within the lands that are zoned to EP1. What I'm hearing from Mr. Fahner is that a garage may be proposed on the back lot at some point in the future. And if that were the case, it would need to be located beyond 200 feet from the high water mark because of the 9.8% lot coverage that would be approved through this application within that distance. And also it would have to be located outside of the EP1 area. So hopefully that provides the information that you're looking for. Happy to elaborate if needed.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll go to council. Any comments or questions on the application right now? Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm a little confused about the size of the boathouse. So, or boat port or whatever we're calling it. I heard numbers starting at 40 feet, then I've read 38 feet. I heard that the applicant wanted, or excuse me, was going to, or agreed with I'll say, Mr. Hay at this point, that it was going to be 34 feet, but that isn't what I see in this draft bylaw. Or maybe I'm not seeing it very clearly. However, there is that question as well. And then I also wanted to ask if prohibiting a building on the back lot, or could we put in place that should a garage be built on the back lot, that that there would be no accommodation and no plumbing features, if that is something that we can actually have part of a discussion on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sharp, I'm going to turn to you. There's some question on the dimensions specified within the boathouse, and it may be from high water mark or not, or I'm not sure. I see Mr. Fahner also wants to comment on that. But I'll just ask from staff first of all. So we're hearing from staff, but maybe you can add to the conversation, Mr. Fahner. And then also a question about what our regulations are for backlot development. I think as it's EP zoned, no accommodation can be provided, but I'll leave that to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I think it's important in this case, and I think what may be causing some of the confusion is the distinction between the length as it's indicated on the submitted site plan and the length of the boathouse as per the layout drawing. They're two separate distinctions. In terms of the maximum length requirement for a one-story boathouse, that length is measured from all points from shore. So it's been identified as an offset from the high water mark of 40 feet. Whereas if you look at the original or the layout drawing for the boathouse, the actual dimension or physical length of the boathouse as it's measured from the exterior walls is 34 feet. So I think that that's what's causing a bit of the confusion. In any case, the boathouse complies with the side yard setbacks, length requirements, width, etc. In regard to the other question about a habitable space being above the garage, there is no, once the lots are deemed as one lot for planning purposes, a garage would be permitted to be built. It could have a sleeping cabin in the upper level, provided it's not, again, in the EP1 zone. And if that were the case, they would need to satisfy the Development Services Department at the time a building permit application is made that that space can be appropriately serviced. Again, given that those things would be considered at that time, council could certainly impose a restriction that no habitable space be permitted in that structure. But again, if servicing is the concern, that would be addressed at the time a building permit application is made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fahner, did you want to add any comments to help clarify for Mr. Hay?
No, just maybe one thing, and Bryce explained it very well, that there is a difference between the size of the boathouse, the actual structure. If you're to look at the site plan, you'll see it's labeled how far it goes out into the lake. And as Mr. Sharp had indicated, that's taken as offsets from the land. So you can have two different figures of the length of the boathouse structure itself versus where it sits on the property and how far it goes out in the lake. So there is a difference in this case. If any other councilors have any questions on that, I don't know whether Bryce is able to put the site plan up, but it'll show you the difference The actual structure is 34 feet in length, but it does go out 42 feet into the water because there is a dock portion behind the boathouse structure itself. So that's what pushes it out a bit. And that's not unusual at all. You want to be able to maintain your structure and be able to walk around behind it.
Okay, noted. Councillor Nishikawa, you have another question?
I wanted to clarify, interestingly, it wasn't the length of the boathouse that I was looking at, but in fact, the width of the boathouse. And I was trying to follow that as well. Just again, that's what I was mostly focusing on because I had thought that that was part of reducing the size of the boathouse and the width was a concern. So I don't currently have an issue with that particular discussion now. I just wanted to clarify that is what the neighbors had, it is what the neighbors agreed with, I suppose. And then again, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fahner, I think the width came down from 22 feet to 20 feet. Is that correct?
And that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else at this particular time? Okay, Mr. Hay, have your questions been answered? I hope we understand the sizing of the boathouse. Right now, and again, from an EP1 zone, there'd be no building in the EP1 zone. There would be identified on the site plan. There would be, as long as it was more than 200 feet away from the shore and between the 200 feet and the EP zone, there would be an ability in the future for the Leemans to bring an application to build a garage, if you will. It may be a bunkie cabin above, but it's as part of one lot. Right now, they could build theoretically a home back there and another accessory structure. So it's actually limiting the development, but would be tying it together as one and out of the EP zone. So that would be noted as well. So I hope that answers many of your comments. Did you have any others? And then I'm going to go back to a council.
Yes, I have a question, Mr. Mayor, regarding the, how do you determine the EP zone, P1 zone?
Mr. Sharp, maybe you want to chime in as to how that gets on the schedule.
Through you, Mayor Harding. In this instance, it would be done through a review of the aerial photography that we have on hand, which is, I think the latest flyover was 2018. So we would do it through our interpretation of the aerial photography. You can see the water line fairly good through that aerial photography. I see Mr. Fahner is perhaps wishing to speak if you're so obliged. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fahner, do you want to add something? And then I'm going to go back to our first and second reading.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out quickly, I know that Bryce had sent me a copy of the air photo for the area. The difficulty is that the property fabric is not shown on there correctly. It's shifted. So I went out personally and measured. I had the surveyor go out and measure where the edge of the road allowance was. And I took measurements back from the road allowance to those stakes that I showed in the pictures in my planning memo. And those are what have been transferred onto the site plan by John Hiley's office. So in my opinion, that's as accurate as you're going to get, and it's more accurate than the air photos. And part of the problem is the property fabric is not correct in that area. Thank you.
Okay, Bryce, final comment?
Through you, Your Worship, I would say that if council is looking to carry forward with that minor amendment, that this is something that Mr. Fahner and I can address at the staff level. So I just make that as a comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa, final comment?
Thank you. Again, about the EP zone and the measurement, and yes, I understand that sometimes the mapping is not accurate. I am curious though, because of the neighbors have raised a concern that someone has, that they feel that the wetlands have been altered. And I'm just currently involved in that myself. And it's interesting because when somebody does a change and how it affects so many others, down the creek, I'll just say, or that water area. And I don't feel confident that we can identify those EP zones at this moment from what the information that's been brought forward. I am concerned that something has been altered, and I am not sure what that is, but it can have ramifications down the way. So I would like a better understanding of what that is before we determine what that EP zone size is.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't remember hearing the altering. I thought that it could be altered in the future. I didn't hear that the neighbor said that it had been filled or was going to be filled. Mr. Hay, I'll quickly ask you, do you believe that the property was filled to change that EP zone?
No, I don't think the property was, I think what happened was that more water was let out at the culvert down at the bottom of the wetland. And it's not often that we find this piece of property back there. We were able to canoe back there last year.
Okay,
and
understand. So the issue being, we just want to make sure that we accurately on the site plan reflect the EP zone. And between Mr. Hiley, who is a highly accurate surveyor, and our planning department and aerial photos, I think we should be able to accurately reflect that on the site plan. Mr. Fahner, final comment, and I'm going to do first and second.
Yeah, just very quickly, and sorry for the back and forth, but I am aware in speaking with the neighboring property owner that yes, the water level has been reduced in that wet area, but he also indicated to me that many years ago it used to be farmland as well.
So, okay, we will be accurately on the site plan identifying the wetlands. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Mazan. This be first and second reading. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2021-14 to amend comprehensive zoning Bylaw 2014-14 Leeman Rule 62434 be read a first and second time. Council, all those in favor? Madam Clerk, we're carried. Thank you. Mr. Sharp, we have some minor amendments. I'm going to read those now. Moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that Township Council amend Bylaw 2021-114 Leeman. And this amendment is minor in nature and does not require further public circulation and is hereby approved prior to third reading. The minor amendment shall consist of 1, rezoning part of the resultant lot to EP or Environmental Protection 1 in order to reflect the wetland feature, removing a requested exemption from the maximum permitted lot coverage requirement within 200 feet from the high water mark, and applying a holding provision to the subject lands in accordance with section 36(1) of the Planning Act, and the provisions required to lift the holding symbol be added by Bylaw 2020-114 that required the approval of a license agreement with the septic system encroaching onto the road allowance associated with Whiteside Road, and alternatively that require the encroaching septic system to be removed. Excuse me. Any comments on the amendments at this time? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we're carried there. Thank you very much. Third and final reading. Mr. Sharp, no more adjustments, amendments.
Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2021-14 Leeman be read a third time and finally passed. Any further comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. I think, Mr. Sharp, the impacts and to Mr. Hay and I think Mr. Cooper, who could not join us. Was it Mr. Cooper? Porter, excuse me. We certainly listened, and I think the applicant, Mr. Leeman, listened to try and find a compromise, and I think we all did accordingly. So I appreciate reaching out and the impacts of the neighbor to try and be peaceful, working towards a compromise. So thank you very much, Mr. Hay, for your delegation, and also working with Mr. Leeman.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Mr. Fahner. I think you're done for the day, or are you going to stick around for the Lang application just for fun? We'll probably stick around. Okay, we're going to move on. I'm just going to read the first Lang application. We'll see if there's any minor amendments. Moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2021-31 to amend comprehensive zoning Bylaw 2014-14 Lang Rule 3.181 be read a first and second time. And this is regarding the boathouses, 2 boathouses on his island. Any comments on the first and second reading? All those in favor? Madam Clerk? Carried. Councillor Zavitz doing a drive-by wave. Appreciate that. Mr. Sharp, any minor amendments on this particular application?
Thank you, Your Worship. One minor amendment to remove the exemption from the maximum permitted boathouse height. That exemption is no longer requested, and that has been incorporated into the amendment, the resolution in front of you. Thank you.
Okay. Council, any comments on the minor amendment or the application at this particular time? Moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved, Township Council amend bylaw 2021-31 Lang. And this amendment is minor in nature and does not require further public circulation. Is hereby approved prior to third reading. The minor amendment shall consist of removing the requested exemption from the maximum permitted height for a 2-story boathouse. All those in favor? Thank you. Third and final, moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-31 Lang be read a third time and finally passed. Any further comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Appreciate it. Mr. Fahner, thank you. Today, from an impact perspective, Council, if I remember correctly, there was plenty of land on either side of this particular property, and I don't think we had any opposition from any of the neighbors. So I think that's probably fair. No major impacts. Okay. Madam Clerk, I think we're going into closed session at this particular point. One more item. Temporary exemption, which I do not seem to have a resolution for, but I should. Somebody stole my resolution. Can we do that coming out of close? Okay. Okay, I'm going to read the resolution to go into closed. We're going to take a quick 5-minute refreshment break, and then we'll come back. But moved by Councillor Nishikawa, second by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved, the council convene in closed session at 3:47 p.m. for labor relations or employer negotiations, collective bargaining pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. All those in favor? There we go. We are in closed. Thank you very much. Carried. And we'll deal with the other coming out. Just take a quick 5-minute break, folks.